Per 9000's Game Room.
RPM Racing, short for Radical Psycho Machine Racing, is a Super Nintendo Entertainment System racing game developed by a company which still exists but most people have probably never heard of, at least not by their original name of Silicon and Synapsis. They are now known as Blizzard Entertainment, a name most people will be a lot more familiar with. The game was published by Interplay, who many of you may know as the original creator of the Fallout series. A lot of people won't have heard of RPM, but even those who have will not realise the connections it has to other racing games. RPM was basically an enhanced remake of a Commodore 64 program called Racing Destruction Set, which was developed by Electronic Arts in 1985. It also has a much more famous and well-known sequel which quite a few of you will have at least heard of if not played. RPM was one of the first SNES games developed in high-resolution graphics mode. This mode was supposed to allow for sharper detail but at the expense of the number of colours used. It was a very early release in general. The logic engine and track editor for RPM were apparently ported almost directly from the previously mentioned Racing Destruction Set, with only some modification done to get it to run on the 16-bit SNES. Graphically, this game just looks very basic. At first it doesn't look too bad, but you'll soon notice that all the tracks conform to a basic kit format. You have green grass, which represents the areas outside of the track, and then the tracks are made up of a mix of dark grey pavement, brown for the dirt sections, a bit of blue for ice, and light grey cement columns which prop up the raised areas. The repetitive scenery soon kind of grates on you. It's practical but a little boring. The sound is so boring and unmemorable you will forget about it the second you turn the game off. The effects are passable, but that's the best I can say about them. You're probably waiting for the point at which I say the game is saved by its story or its playability. Well, in all honesty, there is no real storyline at all here. I can't complain too much as many good racers have had no story at all. You know you're supposed to win, and in a good game that can be enough. The game goes a bit like this. You start the game with nearly 5,000 and this is just enough to buy a car, but this is okay as the first few races are free to enter. The payout for the free to enter races isn't great, but you soon earn enough to pay the small entry fee to other races which have much better payouts if you win. You then spend your time managing your funds. How much do you spend on upgrading your car and how much do you hold back to pay entrance fees? As you progress to higher and higher levels, the payouts become increasingly larger, but the game naturally gets harder and harder. In order to earn cash you must finish in the top 3 or you won't win anything, meaning if you have paid an entrance fee you will in fact lose cash if you finish 4th. So where does the cycle of the title come into it, you might be asking? Well, as well as buying upgrades, you can buy nitro boosts, mines and oil slicks. If you use them well, they might help you, but you'll have to buy them again if you want to use them in a following race. Yes, you can lay down mines and oil, but so can your opponents. If you run over a mine, either one planted by the CPU or one of your own, your car explodes. This doesn't kill you though. You just have to wait a few seconds before your car reappears and you can continue racing. Oil slicks will cause you to skid out of control, again wasting time. One sort of different thing is that you don't have to race every track. It's all about making enough cash to buy your way up the levels. So if you find one track per level that you're unbeatable at, there's nothing to stop you just hammering this track again and again for maximum profit. The main problem this game suffers from, in my opinion though, is a complete absence of feeling of speed. You literally feel like you're crawling around the tracks when compared to other racers, but there's still something there, the hint of greatness. If the game could just be a little more exciting, a little more colourful, if it could just feel a little faster, something in you tells you that there's the bare bones here that could have made a darn good game. This is where the sequel comes into play. If I was to tell you that at one stage RPM Racing 2 was in the works, you'd probably ask, well, why haven't I heard of it? What went wrong? Nothing went wrong. However, it just got a name change and had heaps of colour and style thrown onto it. The sequel was called Rock'n'Roll Racing, which I'm sure far more people have heard of than Radical Psycho Machine Racing. So, should you buy RPM? That depends. Do you enjoy games even if they have faults? Are you interested in seeing the way that a game develops? RPM is an average game, a 5 out of 10 game, but as a prototype for Rock'n'Roll Racing, it's a curious piece of video game history. RPM, as far as I know it, never got a PAL release. It only came out in America and Japan. The American version is seldom seen on these shores, so you'd most likely be either looking at importing it or waiting and checking eBay again and again in the hopes that a copy of it will come up for sale. It's not on any download service as far as I know, and this is very unlikely to change in the future. Take my advice and look for a copy of Rock and Roll Racing instead, as it's a much better game. Okay, that's Kerr9000 signing off, saying keep on gaming.